Hello everybody, welcome to Season 3, Episode 17 of the LJL Officially Unofficial podcast with me, MaskedSwan, and no man in the middle. Who needs men in the middle when you've got two Alexes here? It's Nymaera.
Yeah.
Alexes?
Alexes. Yeah.
No, that's the Amazon assistant.
Yeah, it's like, I was wondering, there's like a murder of crows and a load of these really cool, like, plurals for things. Do we have, like, an official thing for Alexes? I went with, like, a convergence of Alexes. That sounds, like, ominous. But anyway, that's what we've got. You can choose by yourselves what an appropriate word would be. But we have both the Alexes here.
We do.
Because Sam is off doing some
Check his
content
Instagram.
in Cologne for stuff.
He had pink hair for some reason, which that's alarming. But hey, with that said, Nymaera, it's gonna be just the two of us. Playoffs, LJL, but we've got a lot of stuff we're gonna cover. We're gonna have wax lyrically for the first ever time, as you realize. And
we've never had a podcast just us two.
Wild.
So just to kind of get some of the admin stuff out of the way. Obviously, if you're watching this on your YouTubes or your various podcast things, please leave us a review, leave us a comment, even if it is negative feedback or whatever. We obviously want to know that. And yeah, it helps.
It's how we got better, in all fairness. Negative comments in our early days were actually how we got better, and we turned this from a 4-hour podcast almost down to under 2 hours consistently.
And you know what? That segues really well into something that we wanted to blab about, because we wanted to have a chat about a little bit about how us doing this podcast and the various broadcasts kind of helped us do our thing, actually, as amateur on-air talent. Because actually, not too many people have done the whole thing where you start up your own broadcast and just kind of wing it from that point. But yeah,
I would like let's wrap off admin, because mate, how have you actually been over the last few weeks? Because we didn't do one last week. We took a week off because the split ended, so we like to try and give ourselves a bit of time off. How have you been?
So I think NLC finals was really good, actually, in terms of the series.
Fantastic production.
Yeah, there were some tech issues on the day. Audio was cutting out during pre-show, but the actual series itself was really cool. It's one of those series where, remember, like, the crazy Juggernaut match that Middlecut and I did that went to 5 games.
Oh god, that was...
I'm trying to remember if that was a Rascal Jester one. Was that the Rascal Jester one, which DFM lost? No, that would have been spring.
No way DFM have ever lost a BO5 in the Juggernaut.
No, they lost the Summer 21. Yeah, Summer 21, they lost
the... Summer 20... Of course,
they lost the Rascal Jester. Yeah, they did. Anyway, it was stuff like that where, the series just gives you everything. And we're sat there in this NLC finals where the second game is just a stomp, and it's 0-2, and Dusty are just completely down and out. But so that top laner Kerberos, the first final he'd ever been in, he was reverse swept and lost. And last summer, Dan Voxnay, Dusty's AD carry, reverse swept Fnatic Rising and won. And Dusty pulled off the reverse sweep, and it's a good reverse sweep. It's a lot of good team fighting. It's crazy.
I didn't think they would do
performances. I don't think that after game 2, I'm like, this team is broken. But then
I would have been mentally boomed personally after those first 2.
But like, particularly when you've got like Trouble and Hiprain there, who've done the NLC scene in the Nordics and the UK for such a long time, the history was just it was perfect. It was, in terms of the actual gameplay of the series, it's about as good as you get from a best of 5. So I was really happy to be there on the cast and had a lot of fun with it. So that's that was the casting side of things. And then I got to finish off the LEC regular split as well, which was obviously really, really cool, the tiebreakers. So
hell yeah.
I've had some really fun games to cast recently. But yeah, I've just kind of been existing outside of work, trying to figure out work-life balance and stuff, but I'm still trying to figure that out after all this time. Jesus.
Yeah, they're not the easiest things in the world to figure out. I'm glad at least work is going well for you, mate. Now we've got to figure out the life part. So between last podcast and this podcast, things have not gone to plan, I think is fair to say. But when do things go to plan? However, hopefully things are going to come out. I've been spending my time at least being productive. I have written over 15,000 words about Magic the Gathering and why it's the greatest downfall. It's turned from like a 5k little fun essay I was doing to like a full-blown
what's the greatest,
mega
like TCG or...
It's the greatest game. ever created and why it had its fall from grace. Now, this is very opinionated. It,
like,
in my
greatest
opinion,
is in, like, greatest, like, game or competitive game?
Game.
Like, game full stop. Jesus,
game
really?
full stop. For me, it is well and truly. I have had some of the best moments playing Magic, like truly the greatest moments of my life playing the game, and like. It encapsulates so many emotions, so many thoughts and feelings for me. In my opinion, it is the greatest game. Now, it's not anymore. I can surely tell you that now.
So I can see the arguments, right? Because actually what MTG did was it had a wonderful local scene. Like, it had a great local scene. You went to your local shop and you could play that. I remember when my uncle
It
introduced me to them when I was
capitalized
a kid,
what Friday Night Magic was, like going along to a shop regularly.
Yeah, no. And I think in terms of like the local gaming store kind of, I mean, I grew up rurally. I didn't have a local gaming store, so I didn't get to experience this. But from what I know of it, that was really good.
Well,
I know a lot of people who'd ended up playing like Commander. It became a very social thing as well as the competitive thing. That was actually, I can understand the argument. I would disagree. I actually think Dungeons and Dragons is up there. Now, the problem is, it's done enough bad stuff too. Because if you're talking about like that kind of archetype of things, the fact that you can build your own story with D&D is incredible. But then again, it has as many negatives as it does positives because it's fostered a lot of negative interactions with the community as well. And a bit of a...
Both games are better than Warhammer. And I have to say...
but I love Warhammer too. It's better than them, but I love Warhammer. Look, Warhammer is the kind of thing where I'm just like in a toxic situation with Warhammer where I'm like, I know I still deep inside still hold a lot of affection for it, but I know that I can never truly love it again. Because, like, I played a lot of Warhammer Fantasy. I played a lot of Warhammer Fantasy, and then I went on to 40k, and 40k was just like, everything was given to that game, and Fantasy was eventually, they had his legs cut off, and they just killed the game. But like, that, Games Workshop as a company is despicable. Like, its business practices are effectively just like, oh, you have all these models, let's make them irrelevant, release new ones, and you have to spend like hundreds of quid to get up to date again. It's like Genshin, but like 40 years before, and it's just plastic crack. It is known as plastic crack. It will just find ways to make you spend money on something you absolutely don't need and ruins your life.
Yep. Great comic book, by the way, if anyone wants to get into Magic the Gathering. Cardboard Crack. It's a fantastic comic that started over on Twitter, Tumblr, and then has become a full-blown little thing of itself. Magic is really weird because I went through the history of how it became created and everything. I'm like starting to get to a place where I think I'm happy with it, but I've got like 2 sections which are very hard to finish, partly because one is about the endless supply of products that they have been coming out with recently, which I have actually gone into a data analytical sense to emphasize my point. And also why Pro Magic died and might be back. It could be back, and I might be very excited, and I might compete again. But it also might be shit.
I'm thinking I'm back, John Wick style.
Just when I thought I was out, they pull me right back in again. But hopefully in a good way this time. But outside of that, currently in a weird enigma, so that I'm throwing my time into researching Magic the Gathering, and hopefully some good news will be coming soon.
Well, things are like, so we were sat here and we're talking, actually, if there's just the 2 of us, we've got a bit of time to ramble, because you don't have 3 people chiming on every topic. So we've got a bit more time to do some stuff. So I was watching earlier today, bit of the podcast Side Select, which is Thorin, Foxdrop, and Rich. And they did their awards show for the LEC. And things are, the reason I ended up watching this episode is because someone pinged me and was like, hey, by the way, you were like mentioned in passing on the show. And I was like, all right, okay. Morbid curiosity, let's see what it was. Anyway, it was a very fun podcast. I enjoyed listening into it. But one of the topics kind of went around on talent. And it came onto a topic about the talent pipeline, effectively, for particularly the LEC, because that's where we're seeing a lot of talent come up.
I think that's the only broadcast which actually has talent coming up, outside of obviously brand new broadcasts being created over the last few years.
I mean, in terms of like the top level thing. But what I think would be really interesting topic of conversation, because there was a lot of good stuff in there with effectively in terms of like, it's actually just very convenient for the LEC to have NLC because it's in Berlin, a lot of the talent's still there. It's in the studio, which very few but like very few below top level broadcasting League of Legends have. Basically nothing does besides NLC, actually. Unless you're talking about Red Bull Solo Queue and
there is
Twitch. Well, Twitch Hub is remote as well.
Oh no, LVP. Doesn't the Spanish
but they're not
have...
in English as well as the thing.
Oh, right, you also mean in English. Well, Mate,
so
you win
if
that
you talk about the
argument.
English language, NLC is literally the only thing which is like working model of can you just drag someone out of a studio and drop them in the LEC and see how they do. There's a lot of really interesting stuff there, but it's only about half the story because to get to that point, there is a whole lot of stuff below NLC, which is the amateur grind, the semi-pro grind, and we've been through this like over the last 2.5 years because we started 2020, and we've been doing LJL all this time. So I suppose like we could have a chat about the NLC stuff a little bit after that point, or whatever, like the step below the pro stuff is. But how about we have a chat about what LJL did for us in terms of allowing us to do the amateur grind and getting us into a position where we could actually go to the next step, and what the landscape is like actually, particularly for an amateur caster in Europe, because it's very different now than it was 2 years ago. We can talk about it from both perspectives.
Oh God, how do we open up this?
Well, how about we start with like what happened with us when we were thinking about going into esports?
I mean, the thing is, we didn't plan to actually get quote unquote into esports. There was always a nice dream or like an idea, and I think that's honestly a great
hype dream. Yeah.
I think that's honestly the mental
expectations of it. Yeah.
Yeah, setting our own expectations. We were very low. We were like, if we can make a bit of money doing this for fun on the side, this is sick. But otherwise, we were very happy just to learn a craft.
The initial goal was actually because so we started doing it and we thought, let's get experienced and then maybe we can get picked up by someone, sell the broadcast off, or like basically if we're not in a position to continue it, or we continue it with some money involved. And that particularly became a thing once we started talking to the VCS English folks.
Yes.
Because they've been at it for a little longer. Particularly in our first year, they were a couple of streets ahead of us really with how they were doing a lot of stuff. Their viewership was much higher. They had a much cleaner product, and we learned a lot from them. And they helped us a lot too. But our expectations were so different actually than what actually ended up coming out of that.
I don't think I see any upcoming caster that I've spoken to, especially in the last year, that had the same expectation as you, me, and Sam did. Everyone has way loftier, higher things.
We were actually pretty tame thinking about it. Yeah, it was just like, let's just try and let's just see what we can do, because particularly 2.5 years ago, you didn't really see a lot of guest talent up the LEC. It was remote at that point. You still had Ender and Frosk on the LEC. NLC was very locked in, and UKLC as well, actually, the tier 2 NLC, and then you had the Telia series was also pretty locked in because you had a lot of talent who had been there for a while. And this is the bottleneck, right? Where you've got a lot of very talented folks who are in a position where there's basically no upmovability, because you look at a lot of your top tier broadcasts, and I think you can see us a bit in NA at the time, at this time anyway, right now. When you look at the LCS talent, they just have so many talented folks, and it's very difficult to see people getting a real full-time paid position which could work at that point. And that's what we were seeing 2.5 years ago. It's like, look, we aren't going to find ourselves a position on a premier broadcaster, so we need to really find a way to get our own niche. And we noticed that LJL wasn't really being covered. We were discussing either LCL or LJL as places we could cover.
We definitely picked the better region.
God, nowadays, yeah. Well, I mean, God, for 2020, UL obviously got into groups, and that was great for them. But we ended up timing our run really well. We ended up timing it very well. But like, yeah. So that was kind of the situation 2.5 years ago. It was like, all right, let's get ourselves into a niche. Let's just consistently do feedback, and let's just see what we can do. Do it consistently and just pump out content and see what.
Well, and one of those things was we just knew it was going to take us a while to get good. Like we all three of us understood it was going to take us a while to get.
And we were starting at like okay level, right? Considering like we hadn't had on-air talent experience. Well, you had a bit, right? But we were doing some podcasty stuff. But
yeah, but that's fine. It's a different set of skills, as we all know now, far more than better than anybody else.
Whereas Sam and I hardly even did any public speaking stuff. I'd done some like public speaking stuff for gaming societies, and I talked a lot about the game in social settings. But yeah, I mean, I think back to that time, and our expectations were fairly low, but that's effectively what the landscape was like. And then probably fast forward about, I mean, a couple of months, I suppose, and we kind of came into contact with some of the other
I remember
UK casting
Valence League,
and SQ1 really.
SQ1, and we did some Wanyu stuff as well.
And I was doing
Super
Mule.
early on.
I was doing
You
Mule
got
as
Mule.
well.
I was also doing Mule, but not League
Not
Mule.
League.
I
It
was
was
doing
TFT,
TFT
right?
and
Yeah.
Magic when they still could do Magic.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know what Mule is, that's UK university scene.
Yes.
So effectively, we started off with our own broadcast, and we got some videos from that to apply. Well, I got some videos from that to apply to the broadcast, and then we kind of used that as footage to apply elsewhere. And then effectively for, I guess for the rest of that year, we were probably all on about 6, 8, 10 different broadcasts, like SQ1, a couple of like minor things for Wanyu, a couple of like very local scene stuff too, right? But
I mean, I
there
was
was no
talking.
money in it.
No, there
at
wasn't.
all.
And I mean, to flash back to an old podcast episode when we had Temporal on, I believe with me and Initialize, we
Started,
called
yeah.
out to like when I was first getting into casting, and I think I was doing a stream, and then I was jumping off a stream to go. That was something I was doing. I was like streaming all the time. I was like actually insane. Matt might return to an extent. Who knows? Where was I going with this? Right. I actually messaged Temporal to actually do some casting as a color caster.
Yeah.
Because he had like some what was it?
Was it NSC?
British Army? No.
Oh, the British. Oh no, I remember that. Yeah. I didn't get involved in that, but I remember you on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like all these random things, and like we would just take any and all opportunity, and we didn't care if it was paid or unpaid. But the thing is, we had the work ethic where we were like, we're going to do our own thing while also trying to find other things. And I think that's something, honestly, from a work ethic perspective, I think a lot of other casters could really benefit from hearing. Try and find your own thing, your own niche, regardless of what that is. Because if you don't, where's your portfolio? As you said, you used your portfolio that we were doing to then apply.
Yeah, so effectively, to kind of, because we're talking about a lot of specific instances, and it's great to reminisce about that. But the overall point is that before the NLC, there's like this whole just void of amateur casting, which is very bottlenecked. And our way through it was effectively, I mean, I know I ended up on average for the first year and a half of casting 2 years EV. I was casting a game a day on average.
Yep.
Now, a lot of this was remote. It wasn't in studio, so it meant that I wasn't spending time commuting, so I had more time to cast, and I could just roll out of bed. But like I was often doing a couple of best of fives a week, like two, three best of threes a week, depending on what was happening. Because with Valence League, which is an amateur league in EU, which takes on just all comers, I was doing like 2 best of threes a day sometimes, and then like doing that a couple of times a week. But effectively, what we ended up doing in the amateur grind, where there was basically no leads upwards, was let's just make sure we're talking about feedback every once a week, once every 2 weeks on the broadcast that we're doing. It took a while to get good at feedback and to receive feedback well.
Yeah.
Because particularly for us, because when you're first on screen, sometimes you just kind of seize up and you're just like, let's just get through this, right? And that kind of comes with this defensive mindset of like, it's hard to receive feedback when you've kind of had to close yourself off for it. At least that's how it was for me. But kind of opening up to the feedback and being like, all right, okay, let's just get better at this. That's what really kind of shifted things. Probably about halfway through the year, we ended up getting good, I would say. I think summer 2020, we actually did pretty well.
It took honestly, yeah, I think it would say it took us most of spring to really get there.
Yeah.
Definitely. But I mean that was good. Like we actually got to kind of go through the thick of it with each other and then come out the other side, and it's like, oh, we're all actually very proficient, if not above proficient. Now actually pretty freaking good at these things. And it's like, oh, we've only been doing this for like a full split. And what was so good for during that full split is we kept each other actually accountable. Like
yeah, we were kind of in constant communication, and we just like, because it's 3 people, it's kind of easy to, it's not unwieldy, it's just 3 people, and it became quite slick actually.
Which is, in all fairness, something we partly lost. To actually kind of like that's something we did lose because we've expanded to honestly 10 times that. So it's a give and take. It's a give and take.
But then eventually, like, we've done so much content, and we kind of get to the point where, like, we do 3 splits of this, and we're like, okay, we can't do this as, like, 3 people anymore, too many games. So that's why I ended up bringing on more people. But effectively, what ended up happening is that we use this cycle of effectively keep iterating in terms of feedback, in terms of the VODs that we have, showing up, turning up to every broadcast that we can. I was doing this while I was a uni student as well, so I was kind of, like, financially secure for that amount of time. It got through to the end of 2021, and I was like, all right, I've done a couple of years of the games dev degree I was doing at that point, and I was like, all right, I've got to try and make, I'm going to try and make this go full time. But it was just interesting kind of to hear again, like one of these other podcasts talking about the pipeline for talent, where it kind of comes from semi-pro upwards, and how I think one of the lines was effectively, when you're offered the NLC, it's like, that's your big shot. That's the crazy thing. And I completely agree with that. That was the case with Sam and I coming out of like end of 2021, where we actually got that NLC offer. But that doesn't take into account like the huge amount of stuff happening beforehand. And actually, a big thing happened back then too. It's obviously the end of last year, which was the amateur scene and the grassroots scene was completely gutted. UKL, which is the big thing for like UK casters, gone. SQ1 had gone. The Telia series, which is basically Div 2 of NLC, and then the UKLC, that was gone as well. And you had like, I don't know, like 100 odd teams bumped down to about 10 in the second division of that ERL. So in terms of like places you could actually show yourself on amateur broadcasts was severely cut. So at that point, it's like, oh my God, I actually can't get my name out there at that point. I have to jump at this. And obviously Sam and I ended up going, well, we need to be in the right place for our casting stuff. We ended up jumping up to Berlin at that point. So yeah, that was kind of like our grind, but the LJL was very constant throughout all of that to make sure that we can actually get our names out there, continually perfect our craft, and not everyone has that right now. And I would suggest actually it's very hard to do that right now. There are very few constant long-running broadcasts which can help you showcase those skills of storytelling, of getting to know teams. Like, we managed to perfect that a lot on the teams that we had in the LGL. Like, I can think back to Spring 2020, I can remember pretty much all of the teams that we had in terms of like how we built them up narratively. Axes had their Cinderella story, Rascal Jesters with the mad scientists, CGA were like the crazy can't lane but can team fight like gods team. Like, there were so many teams which had these taglines we had attached to them, but you can't do that unless you have long running broadcasts, like actual leagues. And we've lost that now in Europe and actually across a lot of the amateur scene. So while we ended up building that up, when the time to kind of like jump up to NLC happened for like Sam and I, it was like, we got to do this now, otherwise we're not going to have a chance to perfect our craft anywhere. And that was kind of like our point into now the more known pipeline, the one which is talked about more openly.
But that's, I think, highlights a huge issue currently facing the scene. That fundamentally, if you are not somebody like the three of us, where you're willing to just grind it out and then take the first opportunity that you can, and you're in a position to take that opportunity as well.
And actually have the leagues to do that grinding on as well.
Right.
And we made one of our own, but like there were still several others out there. There are much less now.
Yeah, I mean, there are still a few other leagues that people could potentially look at starting up and covering themselves, but even then it's like, you've also got to have the experience and knowledge and understanding of what it takes to set up one of these things. I know from talking to a few of the other unofficial broadcasts, like they're astounded at the amount of work that we still do. And it's not surprising because we do a lot of work to make this thing float and to keep going. Like, it doesn't just keep going without people trying in the background. And that is that is one of those very interesting.
To come out of that the other side and go like, actually, I still enjoy casting the game and I want to work in this.
Yeah,
that's a bit of another thing as well. You got to have a certain mindset for it, which I think we've somehow managed to beat into ourselves and actually still enjoy the game. But yeah, I just thought it'd be nice to kind of like chat about a little bit of the experience before, because I'm sure some of you who've been long-term listeners will know some of this as well or followed us along on this journey. But for anyone who's kind of catching this for the first time, yeah, this is kind of what we've ended up doing for ourselves, but I'm not sure we could do that right now. If we started, it would be a very different path we'd have to take. I'm not sure we could do it as quickly or efficiently in terms of our amateur grind as compared to 2.5 years ago.
No, we were all in very unique parts of our life at that point. And it was also the point that we couldn't go outside, so we almost made the most of that fact as well. It
Being
was
locked down. Yeah.
It was honestly a perfect storm.
And then also like the FM became relevant at some point too, in 2021. That very much helped. And then actually weirdly, when I was working, because I did a lot of UK, like university casting, that ended up leading into one of my first NLC gigs in terms of guesting onto it last year. So like all of these different things ended up helping out, but I struggled to figure out what I mean, there is still some like university casts happening about the place. That's a really good place to get involved. But yeah, when you kind of see these people at this burgeoning level when they were about to go up to your NLC level or like a Div 2 level or something like that, I would be really interested in catching up with some of those folks in terms of their grind as well, in terms of actually what they've done to get to that point. Because when I jumped up to NLC, and actually hell, even when I jumped up to LEC, I actually felt like I had a fair amount of experience. Now, a lot of that wasn't in studio, But the amount of game time which I'd done was pretty absurd comparative to a lot of amateur casters, even though I hadn't been at it for nearly as long.
Where are you gonna get studio experience, though?
Basically nowhere, right? Unless you've got like a local studio, like some universities have it in the UK. So Roehampton has one, but even then, that's not like full studio setup. That's just like that's kind of like one camera angle thing. Staff's Uni has one as well. They have an esports course. But yeah, when I was kind of when we were kind of getting towards that level, I had cast thousands of games. By the time I'd gotten through to kind of like being in the NLC bucket after doing some guesting for them and whatever. So I was like, all right, okay, this is the shot. I think I'm good enough for this. No, actually, no, I know I'm good enough for this. I've just got to show it in studio. And it took a bit of teething process, but that's kind of how I ended up kind of stabilizing coming into NLC LEC this year. Because I think one of the things that I think as Foxtrot was saying on the sides like things that a lot of the people jumping up are people that weren't even like that established. So you think of like myself or someone like Sam coming up from that kind of jump up into LEC. I think that you could say that less about your Goldborg into Trouble because they've been around. They've been guessing on LEC already. They'd been on NLC for a bit longer and whatever, right? But even then, all of us in that situation, we actually have a lot of experience at that point. It's just it's tracking that different progress up to that point, and particularly our own story. We rocket fueled ourselves in terms of the amount of games that we ended up casting. And a lot of that goes unseen because the pipeline below the NLC point, even if you haven't been around for that long, is just so obscured. It's just so obscured at that point.
No one's going to know the work you do unless you either get the right person to see your show reel or the right half the time it's not even showing them the right show reel, it's just the right person sees the right broadcast at the right time, and then you might get an opportunity. And I don't know where those right places, right times are now coming up outside of maybe getting a guest spot on LEC or doing some random NLC.
Yeah,
NLC. I meant NLC, like Div 2 or something else. Like it's really hard.
What I will say is like reach out to other casters. Like, so I have a couple of people reach out to me and ask for advice, and I absolutely encourage you all to do that. I do check my messages, even though that's not always wise all the time, being a bit more of a public figure nowadays. But yeah, I check my messages and I'll give advice. I know Ender as well has been really helpful for me and a number of others that I've reached out for broadcast advice, particularly when it came to going into studio. Ender gave me a lot of advice when I was coming to that. I would literally suggest just dropping a DM and just politely ask for advice, and try and make it specific advice in terms of like, hey, I'm looking at how to, I'm trying to look to improve how I tell my storytelling. Or in terms of how do I present these points as a color caster, how do I do things in a time-efficient manner when I'm trying to talk about the game? Stuff like that, and maybe send a clip over as well if they respond to you. That can be really helpful. But in terms of getting on the radar, a lot of it has to start with just your connections like that and just hoping that people get back to you.
It's also what I was saying to people at the very start, like find some niche that is yours and just make
own it. Just own it.
It's a topic and it's a thing that I learned from Disguised Toast and Ludwig, who are fantastic content creators, obviously, who had very different journeys into where they are now. Ludwig used to post meme content around Super Smash Brothers, and Disguised Toast used to make broken videos about Hearthstone and try to get them to go high on Reddit. Like they very different journeys, but they have very similar philosophies, which is find your niche and then do that as well as you can, build a small audience, and then go from there. And hopefully that small audience can propel you somewhere. And it's a grind. But that's what LJLOU was to an extent. And we are now known as the LJL experts. Like, I might not be on LEC and NLC, but people know me as an LJL expert, which is important.
Yeah. We'll get you there.
One day, mate.
Get the ladder.
Not a very long one, thankfully.
Yeah, he's tall enough. But so that was a bit of a winding topic about terms of like the pipeline that you don't see and how like some things you might see or hear said about people jumping up in terms of guest slots and stuff. There is a huge amount of fucking work put in before you even get to that point. Several thousand hours and a lot of casts when you even get considered for your like your LEC or NLC debut. And let's be honest, a lot of people don't know you before you've made your LEC debut.
That's actually very true. Yeah.
Like there was a really strange thing where after I'd done like my first couple of LEC gigs, so I think it might have been Quickshot or it might have been Vedi. I'm trying to remember. We're saying like I can't remember exactly who it is, but someone around this year was like, you're probably more known now for more people have seen your work now than any time before now. And that's true because you can grind out the amount of hours, but the couple of thousand games I did, as much as they might go unnoticed, more people have seen me in my first couple of games than on LEC than I've done in the rest of my career, which is a really strange thought.
Yeah,
So it might seem like people are popping up out of nowhere, but there's a whole lot of grind before that point. And actually, I'm very interested in seeing what happens with the next crop of casters, because now, because the talent pipeline is a little different now. Nicole does a lot of talent scouting for the LEC. It's not on like see a quick shot or something like that, who was doing some beforehand. There's now actually like a dedicated talent manager. And Nicole is keeping an eye on a lot of stuff. And that will be a very different pipeline to beforehand. And I don't know how that's going to work out. So I'm very intrigued to see who's going to come up after this point. Because some of them will be like the tail end of like the amateur scene that we also kind of came through. But I'm really interested in seeing what happens with the next crop of casters and what their experience is of that pipeline. And does it seem like they've just been jumped up out of nowhere because actually they haven't had as much experience, or actually maybe they had tons of experience, which we've just not found our own, like we haven't seen that. We haven't figured out the way to do that. I'm really interested in seeing how that works.
And I feel like a perfect way to end us off is all these brand new broadcast studios popping up in multiple regions for Riot could also completely change things. Like, things are very much up in the air. I would say it's probably an exciting time if you're a Riot executive right now. You're probably looking at this going, ooh, we have a lot of things going, but ultimately, I'm not fully sure. I also realized which picture I've also was about to transition over to, and that would be a very wrong picture to transition to because it's summer 21, not 22. So I'm not going to do that.
Like, hang on a second. Why is Rascal Jester in second?
I saw Axis third, and I was like, that's that's very wrong. But no, seriously, I mean, I think there's a lot going on currently over at Riot Games. I mean, they've got all their games coming out, they've got their MMOs coming out, they've got the fighting games coming out. Yeah. Like I'm expecting a lot of change. And for a caster, if you want to become a league caster, I mean, yeah, as you said, Alex, DMs are open.
DMs are open. Find yourself a broadcast. And like, because there are two things, right? There's the visibility side and there's the practice side. The practice side, I would suggest starting with someone on a similar level that is like dedicated to it. So that's what Sam, Lexi, and I did, and you can give each other harsh but reasonable feedback. And then also there's the visibility side, which is go find yourself increasingly larger contacts and gigs and the rest of it and see how that works out, because all of that ends up adding up. But if you do things strategically and you end up learning well and doing feedback well, it's still going to take some time. I have no idea. It's definitely not a guaranteed thing, but that's the best shot you will have at it, I would imagine. So
yeah, and have someone and have people that you can actually be honest with. Really important, because all your feedback's not going to be relevant. And I'm sorry that might upset a few people with that kind of tone. But you do need to have people that are going to be honest with you, or you're not going to improve.
Yes, and that's how you also have to get good at feedback too. Because because what we
reminds me of a recent conversation actually.
Yeah, because we had to take a while to not only be good at getting feedback, but also like giving feedback too, because they are actually very difficult skills to do. And sometimes you'll get to know the other person and be like, all right, what are you looking for? But like, so for instance, you can't half-ass your feedback. You can't give people stuff which isn't usable, but you also need to make it constructive. You can't just say, man, you're really shit at this, and then just leave it at that. And it's like, wow, I'm so motivated. It's like, actually, so for instance,
no, that's fair.
I think we did some stuff about body language once for Sam, right?
We did.
And it's like, okay, so when you're trying to engage the camera, it's the kind of thing where like you want to look not right at the camera because it looks like you're staring into the soul. You look slightly off to the side, and
I remember this feedback.
And then you also like, so for instance, like what I'm doing in my hand here, because it's harder on webcam, for instance, that's what we're doing. Sometimes it's nice to have like a more open stance and like gesticulate a little bit, because it helps you kind of actually have a lot of body language which you can't see from like most of my torso downwards, stuff like that. And it's like giving some suggestions to try out. Or for instance, when I gave Melvin Dizzle a lot of feedback in terms of, because he's so good at his game knowledge. And I'm like, I don't want to hear about game knowledge all the time, especially if it's a boring game. How about you talk about X, Y, Z and just think about the tonal shifts that you're doing. Is it too dry? Talk about something narrative. Talk about something funny that happened in your life recently, particularly because we have a more dedicated fan base. You can do that. It's more the LCK style of things. You want to give people like a suggestion, so you're like, hey, maybe you should try doing this next game or whatever, and give them like 1 or 2 goals for each cast. And if you have like 2 goals for each cast and you keep building on it, that's a really good way of giving feedback. And we had to find that out. Like, we didn't know that from the start.
Yeah, no, there's not a perfect blueprint. There's not like a Bible where you
No.
can go to something and be like, how do I become a good caster? Because the issue is every game
It's
is
not a solved science.
it's so different.
Science.
Like the skills I was learning, and honestly, I had built for like 4 or 5 years when I first started doing any casting, which was Magic the Gathering. I was well and truly trained already to be a fantastic caster in that. Game died, so whatever, people. But I mean, I base so much of my thing, and it's a name that I brought up on the podcast before, Cedric Phillips. He is a fantastic caster in Magic the Gathering. Great podcast and everything else. Fantastic personality and helped me with my dissertation and everything else. Like, honestly, great guy. I learned a lot from him. Bringing it over to League doesn't help me, though. It's a completely mechanical thing, so it's really hard to kind of say one size fits all.
Yeah.
Casting's hard, honestly.
It is, and the industry is rough, but like, put it this way, just be heads up, see what niches are there, just get better and get visible. Those are the 2 goals, then think about works towards that. Yeah, that can involve content, work on different broadcasts, reaching out to people. That's what I boil it down to. And then at that point, you start getting to the semi-pro level, and that's a different pipeline. That gets weird. That gets even weirder, right? In some ways, it's a very different thing, but
just
so,
be open
well,
once you get to semi-pro to be open to talking about your salaries.
Oh, true. Yeah. And yeah, if you have any questions about, like, if you're getting into ERLs or the broadcast about your day rates, again, shoot me a DM and I'll talk you through some stuff, and try not to undervalue yourself, because once you're known to do that, it gets very hard to defend your value. And that's a big conversation we've been having, about a lot of people have been having recently. But anyway, so Sides Select had their own chat about kind of getting into the LEC, and then the NLC is kind of important to that. And there's a lot of things about that. That's good standalone content. This is kind of just below that, about how the hell did we get to the NLC? And what happened before that point? And actually, does that change your perspective beyond that point? Nice to cap that off, particularly because it's just the 2 of us. It was nice to bounce back a couple of thoughts. Right, should we get on to LJL?
We should, and let's start off by actually first saying goodbye to 2 teams who we will not have to talk about for several podcasts, and honestly, probably really till 2023 season. Sad, as one of these teams were used to being here, and one of these teams is also we're used to being here, but also they're not used to being here. These are 2 teams we've gotten used to sometimes not seeing. It's been nice, but sadly V3 Esports and Axis are no longer with us. I mean, from our last episode, out of the 3 of us, we didn't expect any of them or either of them to really make it. There was a small chance for Axis, but considering trajectory, there was no chance in hell I was expecting them to make it.
I mean, there was a slim chance because everyone was losing stupid games. But yeah, on the whole, this isn't unexpected that Axis and V3 ended up like going out. I mean, V3 took a scalp off of CJ to put them down in 5th, but it would have been the same. It's the same matchup either way, because we'll get onto that in a bit. But like, it doesn't change that much.
I do think if you look at the end performance, I feel like V3 were actually a better team than Axis, and V3 did beat Axis. So there is some volition to that idea.
And this just goes on to kind of like really hammer down the point that we were saying that actually V3, even though they have the world record of all time for League of Legends in terms of loss streaks, competitive loss streaks, or in terms of world's qualifying regions anyway, I'm actually not... I mean, because there isn't very good archiving of not worlds qualifying.
Nymaera, are you saying LoL Esports isn't a good website for actually finding out information about your favorite teams
or independent
and players?
leagues, or independent leagues don't do their own archiving? Crazy. Who would have thought that? But like V3 were not the worst team of all time. They were bad, but they weren't the worst team of all time. Certainly
in
not
spring. They were the worst team for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. But like even then, 0-21 for spring. Considering the amount of early games they managed to actually do well in, I was like, surely they should have closed out one of them. Like their mid game and late game was
Swain in spring. They shouldn't have lost.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have lost.
Yeah, there were a couple of games like that where I was like, look, this team is actually not as bad as we thought. And I think we managed to just about see that at the end. And honestly, 3-19 is probably where I'd peg them for the whole split. It would have been nice to see the wins kind of spaced out a little, so we weren't as quite down on them. But yeah, I think V3. They showed us that they could still pull out an early game lead, and there's something there. Now, I expect this roster to still explode over the offseason. I think this is a failed experiment, but yeah, I think I would agree that at the end of the split, probably were better than Axis, who looked so headless. This team just did not know what they were doing. They couldn't play heads up. They didn't understand win conditions and loss conditions, and when to or when not to choose a fight. Like, they're both definitely the worst teams. I don't think it's like, it's splitting hairs a little bit to say which one's better or worse, but if I had to, it would be V3 over Axis. So
I think to end this on a more positive note, because obviously both these teams didn't make it, and I'm not going to repeat what you just said because I've already said it, and I agree with you on them. Crazy. To end on a positive way, let's think of a few players from both teams that I think I would like to see again. So one of those for me would actually be Washide. I really liked seeing Washide in the league. He was a Japanese top laner who actually kind of felt like there are ideas of improvement. There are ways that this player can get better as the splits go on. And I would like to see more from them. I'm not so sure if I'd like to see some of the other players from V3, but Washide was definitely a bright spot for me. Have you got a player or two?
For V3, I mean, things are like, I keep remembering back to 21, where Unica and Yu-Gi-Oh were subbing in for V3, and are actually pretty okay. I wouldn't want to see them again on this roster, and I wouldn't want to see them again in a...
Oh, this can be in any league, in any team.
This is what I'm giving the context, right? I think I think the top side of the map from V3, Washida, Unica, Yu-Gi-Oh, if you put them as like one amongst two rookies and a more veteran team with actual shot callers and a better support staff, I think I would be okay seeing them again, just develop them a little bit. I think we saw that this split has some potential. Unica and Yu-Gi-Oh, we saw that last year more than this year. But I think, given the right circumstances, I wouldn't be remiss.
Yu-Gi-Oh had bigger moments, but honestly, then I'm just hashing up. Honestly, Yu-Gi-Oh having a good moment, but then that was also the same for Unica. So
Axis on an individual level, they had some like okay moments.
This is why I asked you the question, because I don't know if I actually want to see any members of Axis again. Not to be rude, but like
I don't know whether we're done with the Mega Man experiment or not.
I mean, I'm okay with Mega Man for a third year. You know that. That's fine by me.
It's not like there's another like Japanese mid laner that's going to be.
Well, you say that. I mean, I think there's a few academy players who could very much take his place.
You know more about that than me, but like I think that Mega Man is like he's done a lot of growth since his initial split. Because his first split was dog, man. It was so bad.
It was.
And then his summer in 21 was very good, actually, comparative. He found champions which made it work, right? And just put him on Iron Spike Whip champions, it'll be fine. He'll just clear the wave and he'll farm into teamfight relevancy. And that worked for him, right? As Lee Sin as Renekton.
I think a player that I don't know if we've ever seen his name in, so I'm going to quickly just double check that. Did he ever actually sub in? No, he's not. A player called Re. R-R-E. I've been watching him since he was on DFM Academy last season. He was on Scouting Grounds. He was in the second Scouting Grounds team. I think he would probably be an upgrade for Mega Man.
Well, it's easy to say that until they hit pro, but that's what we kind
of
said about
a player he's actively currently playing against is Cocoon at the moment, who is
because he's playing in both the academy.
Yeah, because CJ's playing in both, and he's very much matching him. I would say Ree is currently losing the skill-based match at the moment, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's bad. And also, this is best of one format in an academy league, which is very much not getting the support it needs. Please support it.
I'll say, like,
yeah.
For the rest of that team, Yelioshi, 2 constraints, Poppy's great. Didn't really see much outside of that. Swamp is fine, has some good moments. Sangchu is fine. Ozka, I was not convinced with. Dicey, I would love to be convinced with because he's a lovely guy, but has also struggled. Now, I don't know what's happening with Axis. I can't imagine that's a very good team atmosphere at this point.
At this point, no.
Yeah, they've switched through some players. It wouldn't surprise me if there was some internal strife with that team at this point, particularly when they've done so poorly. I mean, it's like the thing is I put it this way. I think the only people I would like to see back from these rosters are ones which aren't with a team like this. They're put into a more experienced team to develop. So I think that I would be happy doing that with. Maybe you do it with Mega Man again. I could see that happening. Top side of V3 is fine. Outside of that. I mean, Swamp and Shangshu are fine. They're just imports, so why would you do that? You know,
do you really want to import them again?
Well, that's the thing. Like, if they're going to be in an LJL team, they're going to take up an import slot. So I don't know if I would do that. So if I was a team manager, I would be looking at Mega Man and the top side of V3 probably. That's the only ones which I consider. And
honestly, I know we're going to talk about this team and the player later, but Vikal, Vikal.
Vikal, coach for Rascalista.
No. I mean Vital. Thank you.
Game for,
yeah, you know exactly where my dyslexic brain was going. Thank you, mate.
The both 5-letter V words. What can it be?
It's one of the two. honestly, we saw an interesting experiment with obviously a Korean player from LCK Challengers. Now, I wonder if potentially we might just see a lot more Challenger players now coming over to the LJL. Obviously, I brought up the fact that LCK, the system is not fantastic at the moment, so there is a chance of actually making more money currently as a rookie player or a low-level player.
The Challengers thing, but they've got. I never really. What were the footnotes of that actually?
Teams get a lot more power. Players seem to be losing power, but I thought it was meant to be the opposite. So I've always assumed I've just misunderstood it.
Honestly, I would imagine we're going to see a lot more Challengers players going to minor regions and the ERLs as well, right? I mean, we've seen that with Chasey for X7. They just got
Ruby.
Second in NLC. Ruby, who's doing wonderfully in Prime League. 5Kid and Harp have both done themselves. Like, LCK Challengers is a hell of a talent factory. It wouldn't surprise me if we see more people kind of leaving there because there's too much of bottleneck in LCK, and there's money to be made elsewhere. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think Sangchu or Swamp were any better than any Challenger players you could probably have gotten out.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you're fighting an argument which is hard because we know that currently, when you do bring Challenger players in, you get players of Honey-esque caliber.
But even then, Honey took a year or two to mature, right? Like his 2020 was
did. That's
poor. Fair. Like, I mean,
it was
looking back on it, it was poor. It was awful. Actually, his spring in particular was very bad. But then actually, come 2021, end of the year, he was maybe even the best AD carry in the league. Most important one for his team, I reckon.
MVP and everything, yeah.
But then the question is, because he was on Hawks doing that. He was on Axis for a bit. Wait, no, Honey, he was on Hawks, and then he was. Where did Honey go elsewhere? Actually, I'm trying to remember the teams he went through. Actually, God, complete brain fart. Actually, because he went through a couple of teams, right? And it wasn't like it was obvious where he was going. Yeah, because he went from Hawks to Axis and then to Sango. Yeah, because I was like, it was the two yellow teams. That's why I can remember that. It's like two yellow goes. But it's very odd for that to happen in my mind because that's two different coaching staffs. And two different teams, right? I mean, it's not like you're sitting in one place and gathering that one kind of set of coaching skills and whatever, right? Or player skills from those coaches, rather. So I'm really interested in seeing what the development process is for any of these players coming in. Are we going to see a multi-year plan for one of these rookies come in, or one of these imports, rather? Because I think the Honey thing, I wonder if that's an exception.
I think it's a complete anomaly. I don't think you normally see that in professional play. I don't know many competitors in many games that you normally see them bounce around from team to team to team and seem to go from strength to strength and then have a split off at the very height of maybe their caliber. It's a super weird thing, and obviously we'll see them later. Let's actually go on to one of our playoff matches, I feel.
Goodbye, Axis. Goodbye, V3. We'll talk about you next year sometime.
It's been great, but there's no reason for us to dwell on you for much longer. So, hey ho. Let's go for, I feel like, honestly, the easier match to go through, which is going to be the Fukuoka Softbank Hawks Gaming facing off against Burning Core. Now, I'm actually going to be hosting this best of 5. My prediction, because I feel like I like to do this. You know how I like to run the desk and shows. I always like to start off with predictions to start off to set the expectations. Yes. My prediction is 3-0 Hawks, and anything else is a bit of a disappointment for the Hawks.
Yeah, I locked in mine as well, 3-0 Hawks. So yeah, I mean, I think it was fairly obvious that the Hawks were clear third best team. Like 4th through 6th were not particularly close to the Hawks, but the Hawks were also not particularly close to the top 2 either. So that's, in terms of like expectations, there's no way I think you could realistically predict Burning Core, especially after their last run of form as well. They dropped a game to V3. They were not stable. And what this means is actually, so we get to do a bit of narrative, a bit of story time for this, because this is a revenge match from spring playoffs. And that was important because that had a lot of connotations too back in spring. Because in spring, you had the Hawks and you had Burning Core facing off against each other in the first round. Neither one had ever won a best of 5 in the LJL. They'd never gotten past the first round of playoffs. Now, we didn't have that many teams and many best of 5s in playoffs up until 2020, so it's more of a modern era thing. The Burning Core were always mid-table. They made playoffs several times and then just bombed out at the first match because they were against the top 2 teams, and they were very much mid-table even back then. But Burning Core finally progressed past the first round of playoffs by beating the Hawks. Now, the Hawks are coming in, and this is going to be a great chance to like stomp home a real revenge story. So I'm really looking forward to that from that perspective, even though the roster has changed and a lot of the expectations have, right? I'm still looking forward to this to kind of be like the bit of the org drama, I suppose. It'd be like, yeah, Burning Core knocked the Hawks out last time. Hawks get to return the favor. That's what I'm personally invested in terms of like the LJL historian aspect of it. Let's see if Hawks can get their first victory in a best of 5.
I mean, from the perspective of like just an LJL fan, I think that's the most interesting narrative because otherwise this could just become a very sad to watch series. Because this could be one of those series where you just watch it and go like the kid from Simpsons, stop, he's already dead. Yeah, like I can very much see this being a very sad repeat potentially. Well, not a repeat, but honestly, we watch game 1 and then it's just Hawks slamming Burning Core on red side, which is currently not the thing. I do think there is an interesting thing around side selection at the moment. Burning Core have only beaten bad teams on red side this whole season. They have struggled to adapt. They perform a lot better on blue side, but because blue side is actually easier and better season for competitive play and for more so for pick and ban reasons. Like,
I mean, there are some teams which I think very much need red side for certain lane counter pick. So actually, the NLC finals, the one which just for ease of, I was casting it recently. It was a big thing that we used there. Like they needed top lane counter pick because like the top lane laning difference was just way too high in a lot of those games. What they ended up finding was that actually the counter picks which they'd prepared for that best of 5 were a bit iffy, especially like no counter picks. They didn't really have. They tried Camille into it, and it was like, yeah, this ain't working. So I think particularly in this one, I think the Hawks are gonna. Like, I don't think they care. I don't think they care about the champions like too much. I think what they've shown is they actually have a lot of depth in what they can play in mid jungle. There was a little bit of time in the mid split where I'm like, do they actually have enough picks? Are they just always gonna go like Wukong Ari? And then they pulled out like Vi Lissandra and a couple other champions. I'm like, okay, no, actually they do have a lot of mid jungle champions because getting onto that side of things, I mean, the Hawks are probably our easiest team to say this is the way they play. They just love playing through mid jungle, right? It's Blank and Dasher, and they're kind of the engine house. While you get a lot of secondary damage sources on top and bottom, right? Where you get your AD carry and so you get Marble. Just an easy job.
The heat map, if you go and look at the heat map on Game of Legends for Blank pre-15, he just looks at bot and then looks at mid a bit. But like he's so hyper focused in bot, and it's like, well, no shit. Like, of course, Reiner has one of the higher first blood percentages, as does Blank. Both of them in the 40%. The Hawks have a 40% first blood rate. Like, if they get first blood, it's commonly bot lane or Reiner roaming mid, and it's happening there. It's never top. Like, they don't touch top lane. It's a blimmin' island. And hilariously, I remember when we've spoken to a few other people around this matchup, a lot of people are like, maybe Ray Farkey can do something. It's versus Kinatsu. That's the one player who's not Ebby, where you go, yeah, I don't think he can actually really do that because he's really proficient at doing one thing, and that's not losing the early portion. Even when he played against Ray Farkey in their last matchup, right? I rewatched this because of Meanwhile in Japan doing fantastic clips. No, this is where he's Kinatsu's playing Gwen. He gets actually killed in like I don't think it's first blood, but he basically gets taken out of his lane a little bit. He just scales, and then he promptly gets a kill single-handedly on Ray Farkey later in game. And it's like, well, if you don't actually hard shut down Kinatsu, he's not someone that just loses one wave and loses a kill and then just kind of rolls over. He actually knows how to play. Yeah.
He's very stable. And I think what the Hawks have done really well to allow Kinatsu to be stable is just give him an easy job. I think the reason that they put resources bot side is this challenges a lot of what people have built up over a number of years about where do you prioritize as a team. Some people say, oh, this team is such a top lane focused team, or such a bot lane focused team. What is weird about particularly this year, actually, because of the way that they've affected teleports, so you can't teleport bot lane and bot lane fights, is if you gank bot lane all the time, or you're continually playing through mid jungle, that means the enemy has to respond in those lanes, right? Because if you're continually like dumpstering on bot side, the enemy jungle needs to come down. So which means that if you have strong early game champs that can force the enemy to respond, and you don't go top lane is isolated. Now, if you have a good matchup in top lane at that point, you can actually gank bot side while still being top side focused. It's really strange. So your top lane can win without you ever turning up top lane. You just go bot lane and force the enemy to not go top lane. So if you have a Shyvana into an Ornn, or you have a Gwen that's scaling up, or something similar to that, then your top lane is still getting an advantage. And I think that's what we see from the Hawks. And what's happened there is effectively Kanatsu is good enough in lane that he's not going to get rolled over. I think you're completely right about it. He's a very stable player. Doesn't mean he's not being set up for success. His team just go elsewhere and just make sure he's never going to get fucked with. Like, he just never needs to worry about anything. Like, he's just going to be there playing out his matchup, and he'll eventually just turn up to the right place.
But honestly, to emphasize this point to the umpteenth level, because I want to, and I want to call out Ebby, because he is the most win top lane with minor assistance. But the guy, and I don't know if you know this stat off the top of your head, he's had 16 solo kills this split.
Yeah, he's ridiculous. It's like Spring 2020.
It really is. And like, this is just like exactly like to emphasize your point, like top laners at the moment, they're facilitators in a lot of the sense. Yeah. Like it's partly why Gnar has grown to such prevalence at the moment in the meta, or at least my philosophy is at the moment, is why he's grown.
The new patch changes that because Mini Gnar is he's lost a lot of base HP, so you can play counters into him more. But like, particularly on a lot of the regular season, it was like, well, you don't really get to do much about this guy. He's just going to slowly accrue an advantage.
And it's Kanatsu's also most picked champion as well. It'll be interesting. So, but
there are some teams that will play like Aurelia, Yone, not that many other things, but like stuff like that, which are like direct Gnar counters. And we'll see it's a bit. I mean, Broken Blade plays it in Europe. LPL plays more stuff like that. And those just be like, okay, well, if we're going to isolate top lane, let's do it with a cool duelist champion. And then sometimes you get some weird stuff where then actually the team's like, yeah, I don't really want to leave a Yone alone. That sounds bad. So you get some games like that. But on the whole, the way to play the game around top side is actually, ironically, to not play towards top. You go to the other side of the map, you're like, well, top lane's isolated, and I'm going to back my winning matchup / better top laner to just win the lane.
Which, I mean, duo-wise, Flawless and Rayfarki, blank. Okay, I should say them in the same way. Blank and Kanatsu.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly it's obvious by my pronunciation there of which duo I would take gladly at the moment. And I think that's also honestly partly because of where the jungle meta pool has gone at the moment. Like, Flawless just has not been able to
Flawless
catch
is not
up.
a facilitator.
No.
He's not a facilitator. And the problem is you are not going to be winning your laning phases. Not really. Rayfarki, it kind of sucks to hear this, but Rayfarki is not really a top tier top laner anymore. He has good moments, but he's not been consistent, and he's not had the high highs which he's had. It's not like 2020 where he was playing tons of Jace and just crapping on kids, or his Darius. Now, I think Darius is a great pick right now.
And it is getting banned a lot against them.
Yeah,
so.
and I think that Darius should make a comeback at some point in the series, and I think that as Gragas has been fine because he'll just have some teamfight impact. But
yes, agreed.
Rayfarki is going to survive the laning phase / do well. Mid lane is like, well, Dice has some okay moments, but he's not like a lane crusher. He just scales again, like on stuff like a Zero Victor most of the time. And then bot lane, you got Yuhi. So you need to have a facilitator somewhere, and it's not coming from jungle, and your lanes are weak. So you're not going to have a facilitator to save your early laning phase, which means that you can't speed up the early game, which means that the Hawks, who normally wait a little bit, they're not very fast-paced themselves. You have a really bad matchup here from Burning Core into Hawks. I just can't see this being anything else but a 3-0. I think even if they have a good draft, they're not going to hit Hawks early. They're not going to stop them from getting to the point where Marble and Kanatsu are issues, and then Blank and Dasher start finding the fights that they need. And I think they're just going to fall apart. I think this is an awful matchup for Burning Core, and it does not surprise me that the Hawks chose them.
That's the
luxury of being 3-0. Let's see it.
Yeah, that's the luxury of being third place, definitively ahead of everybody else. Yeah. Not going to worry about it, and you get your side selection through at least the first 2 rounds. So, well, you're guaranteed actually for the first 2 rounds, and obviously you're probably never getting side selection again because you're always going to be lower seed. But hey, that's how it works. Good luck to Hawks. I'm expecting to see the winner of this next battle, as we've both said countless times. So let's go on to it. I can't predict this matchup. It is Rascal Jesters facing off against Can't Guarantee Anything, or rather known as Crest Gaming Act. Jesus, the battle of the 8 and 11s or something stupid like that. 8 and 20.
Yeah.
Oh no, it was awful.
8 and 13. 8 and 13.
8 and 13.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But yeah, God. But then you consider that like CJ have like some random losses which they shouldn't have lost in there, and this. I don't know. I don't know about this one. I really don't, because for me this is more about what form Crest Gaming Act turn up in rather than Rascal Jester. Because this series is just bluntly over if CJ turn up on their bad day, because they can lose to any team in the LJL, and Rascal Jester are still.
They have proven that.
Like, Rascal Jester, like, even though they are much worse than they have been at any time in the last 2 years, which is really sad to see, actually, because they've just not reached that level, they're still, out of the mid-table teams, in terms of these three, they're the most stable, right? So Rascal Jester, I don't expect them to turn up particularly well or badly, but they'll turn up. CGA, this is a team which... yeah. They can lose to absolutely anyone, and it's very hard to explain why, actually, because they should be a team which should be playing very consistently with their win conditions. They're a very easy team to predict the win condition of. Get hybrid ahead, and somehow it's just like they throw it.
So I would like to hit the idea that I think Rascal Jesters, their mid jungle duo, is currently the weakest we have ever seen it. Outside of summer 2020, which doesn't count.
The Elo Hell roster, yeah.
That doesn't. Elo Hell, we don't count. We don't discredit Pink and his poor time that he had to do. He did the best with what he's got. And that was a nightmare situation. I actually think Hachimecha and Recap are currently playing worse in general than Cocoon and Kassin, assuming everyone comes in form that we're expecting.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think
Kassin is a bit more proactive than Hachimecha.
Yes, I mean, Kassin's not had like the worst split ever, right? He's just not been inspiring.
Which is actually
which is something he has been for. Again, he's been here for 2 years now, right?
Yeah, crazy. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, this will be like this split will be the end of his 2-year tenure, effectively, and then he'll go on to a third, I guess. Well, we'll see if we keep him. But yeah, I think that Kassin is just the kind of guy that just has to go bot lane. Now, of course, you are into Soul and Secret, and there's a chance that they have a great revival, and you throw resources at them, and they just kill you. It's a little different because they've had their own issues with having Hachimecha come down to help them, and the problem is right now so I've said this a lot about mid lane, because mid lane is no longer a 1v1 lane. It hasn't been since season 6. Really, most of mid lane is a 3v3 because you need to be very intimately aware of where the jungler is and where supports are in regards to support reset timings. But bot lane is also, for the first time in a little while, because it was quite 2v2 in spring, it's now 3v3 in summer. Because in spring, when you had like Jinx, Thresh, Aphelios, Senna, Tahm Kench, stuff like that, it was more about your 2v2, just brute forcing, win the first couple of levels, then your support goes roaming around the map and whatever. In summer, it's been more about, can I kill the enemy lane? Can I dive the enemy lane? Can I push in the lane to invade the enemy jungle? Bot lane is actually a 3v3. I think in a 2v2 sense, I think that Nema's been a bit
Yeah, no, that's where I was gonna go.
So I think in a 2v2 sense, I think there's actually an angle for Rascal Jester, right? I think that Soul and Secret are still fine in the 2v2, good in the 2v2 even. But like in a 3v3, it's not been good. It's not been good for them. So it depends whether the series, for me, comes about. Is it going to be straight laning Brawn from Rascal Jester in the 2v2, or is Kassin just going to flip the table and Rascal Jester don't have the firepower to deal with it anymore because they've not this split?
I honestly do think that's probably where it's going to go if you just assume recency form and recency bias brought in, because honestly, the Jesters haven't really been showing up. Bot lane especially has not been a bright spot. They might not... They sometimes just lose lane. They just randomly miss a wave, and I'm like, I don't know where the fall-off is. I don't know what's happened to this team or these players. Sometimes players just don't work with metas, but I don't really know where it's gone at the moment. And honestly, the direction that I love that you took this was honestly, okay, let's throw this on Crest Gaming Act. I don't have any questions around hybrid. I do think hybrid is just going to be a better AD carry at the moment through recent form than Soul. Then Secret versus Nemo, I think, is a fantastic point to highlight, because Secret, there is a playoff chance that he will just pop off and we can forget about everything from the last regular season. I do believe we have that still for Secret, and Soul to an extent as well. But Soul's got a more difficult opponent. I think last time we saw Nemo really come out, it was around this sort of time. It was towards the end of summer, to going into playoffs with Axis. I don't think this is really the spot where he's going to succeed. Now, last time it was a Thresh/tank heavy meta. It was all about protect your AD carry as best, be the front line, or
This
set
is
your AD carry
actually.
as much as possible. This is not where we're currently at the moment in the meta.
This is a really good conversation, because I actually had a chat with Kazu from DFM around the time of that meta, and we had a bit of a messaging. Actually, was this around MSI?
Was it going into
No,
World?
I think this was summer. I think this was when like Axes were doing really well, and we had some messages trade. It was some tweets. Yeah, it was some tweets. It wasn't like we did a couple of Twitter spaces at some point around spring, but this was after that, where I was like asking why Thresh was so high prio, particularly in the LJL at that time, because there were some other picks being picked up elsewhere. So the logic goes like this: in the LJL, you have a lot of multi-language teams. The only one which isn't is V3, because they're all Japanese, right? Where you'll have some other teams which will speak either Japanese or Korean in some case. Like Sengoku, when Vital is in, I believe they're speaking Korean.
All Korean, I believe, yeah.
But when Honey was in, it was speaking Japanese. But like they speak in Korean when Vital's been playing. DFM, they speak in Japanese, but like DFM are like the one exception, because the players which they pick up are very fluent most of the time. But the long and short of it is there are language difficulties in a lot of these teams, which means that when you are talking about in-game very complex macro things in terms of let's look for this, wave timing is at this point, I'm slow pushing to here, let's rotate at this point. Some of the nuance can get lost because you don't have those language skills, which means that playing a wider map in the way that the VCS does when they play a lot of side laning. And you see that.
I love that you brought the VCS up for this.
Yeah, because it's a great example, right?
Because
it is. They're a very scrappy single language region most of the time, right? Or of course, you know, you're China or LCK, right? But like in the LJL, you don't see a lot of side lane play because of language difficulties, because it's harder rather to communicate those nuances. So a lot of teams find more success in playing front to back, peel back team fights. So when it came down to the hypercarry meta, when you had Nema and Honey on axes, it was very easy to just say, look, they're not going to play the wide map. They're going to dive into us. We're going to have a long range AD carry. So Thresh is the perfect champion to deal with champions diving into me. So Nema could very easily just hands off, just be like, I'm going to save my skills for when they jump into me. And then when they use all their stuff, I can then chase them down with like a flash hook or whatever, and like do some cool mechanics at that point. But on the whole, Nema in that meta, because of actually the language difficulties of the LJL, the butterfly effect is Thresh is a great champion because no one's playing split maps and all you're dealing with is people diving into you and engaging. Butterfly effect.
Which is not currently, though, where the meta is at this moment in time. Which is, honestly, I think that's why I loved what you brought up, because, honestly, I think that could be maybe a weak point even, where if Brascal just find a way to exploit that point, you know, it's the weak point in the armor, if you can find a way of really opening it up, it could be the leak point.
I would love to see Recap go back to Vega or play something like Talir a little bit more.
I don't know why he's not playing Veigar anymore. I think the champion's still perfectly fine in pro play.
I don't fucking.
I think it's perfectly fine, especially in somewhere like the LJL. No offense to all of our players, but like I think especially in this matchup, I think he could probably play Syndra and Veigar.
I think you should play Talir. Just play Talir. It's super easy, and like if you want to play towards bot side, make your mid lane super easy. Just play like Poppy Talir. So if they want to play their weird shit like LeBlanc or something like that, just be like, okay, I'm just going to shove. I don't need to worry about laning phase, and I'll just roam first. Now it's different. Now Rascal Dust would then have like an early game burden to go like, all right, you're pushing in lane, now what? Because Hatchmatch has not been great at using that either, right? He's been looking for some stuff, but it's not really been great. But I think if they start picking up stuff like Talir or push and roam mids, maybe that helps Recap again. I'm not too sure, but if I was to triage some of the mid jungle issues, maybe that would help. And if they make that adaptation heading into this best of 5, maybe they come out a little stronger. I still think it's going to be quite close coming into this, right? Like, we're getting a lot of conditionals. We've been a little bit iffy. So, I guess...
You want to talk about close? The top lane, which we haven't talked about once, because I think these two players are perfectly evenly matched. I don't think there's going to be an edge.
Like, that guy is Mr. Consistent. He's probably the most consistent top laner outside of every. I know we talked about it for Kanatsu, but I know is like, this guy's a rock. This guy is just, he's unflappable. Always brings the same value to every game.
But then that's what I think what is the beauty of what Nap is currently doing for CGA, because he is that X Factor point, which I would argue Ino currently isn't, and has never really had to be an X Factor point in most of his career. He's just been Mr. Consistent, as you said, and I would agree, he is. I would argue, though, that I think if you need someone to be an X Factor, having your top laner be an X Factor in this best of 5 could be an angle to find that one extra win. I guess if we're gonna twist our arms for predictions, Nymaera, I'm gonna go 3-2, because I think we'll get the full 5 games out of these two teams, and it'll be CGA because they've got side selection. That's where I'm going with it.
I think it's entirely based on prep and whether any of these big issues have been sorted. I think if Rascal Jesters have just a band-aid measure for mid-jungle, it's 3-1 Rascal Jester. If they don't, it's 3-1 CGA. I think it's 3-1 either way. I think it's close enough that you'll see a game sniped from one side, particularly if it's like the
Jester have side selection. Ooh, that changes it.
I actually don't think side select matters that much. I think it's more about because I don't think they will have prepped for whatever the hell the other team is prepping in the first couple of games, right? It will be some adaptation. I think that it will get a bit funky around about like game 3, game 4, if it comes to it. But yeah, I think if Rascal Jester have something sorted out for mid jungle, even if it's just a couple of picks, like I said, the Slayer or whatever, I think that tips the balance to them. If not, I think they really struggle. I think that Nap has been too good at killing AD carries, and they need their AD carry to do really well. If it's just Nap Akali, it's like, well, Sol can't fight. So
that's a fair point. And then who else in Rascal Justice is going to be the carry? Like serious question. Like, we're not in the jungle carry meta now, so good luck to Rascal Justice.
You know, like that TikTok star who just kind of looks at you and just goes like, just there is Sol. That's it. Yeah, so I think that's the way I categorize it. Look, so this one is very, very close. It's only 10% in it, probably either way.
Interestingly enough, you want to know what the betting websites are saying at the moment?
What are they saying?
They are horrendous. They are hugely siding at the moment with Rascal Jesters.
Betting CGA then, if you're a betting person.
Oh, I think at the moment you can bet like a tenner on them, and you'll get something like 25, 27 pounds. I got back, which is great odds, by the way. So honestly,
I don't know. I will preface it to say I'm not a betting person. Bet responsibly if we're ever going to talk about that shit. But if you're going to, this would be my pick for it. It's a close matchup.
And that was on one site, so who knows if all the other sites are like that. But yeah, we're not sponsored yet. But hey, who knows? Maybe a cryptos website wants to sponsor us so we can do a podcast and get paid for it. I don't know. Who knows nowadays? Who knows? Let's move on though to the match that is probably the most exciting match to talk about. And that one is going to be Sengoku Gaming in first place, taking on Detonation Focus Me in second place. Now, we first do have to explain to lovely people out there, because they won't potentially have seen all of the build-up to Sengoku Gaming versus DFM. They won't know why we're going, haha, Sengoku first, and then we're kind of joking about it. So, these teams, during the regular season, went 1-for-1 fairly. Right, these were 2 games where Sengoku got the edge in the first round robin. They were prepared for DFM. They smacked them. Second round robin, DFM were on a tear. They smacked Sengoku. It just felt like these 2 teams were prepared for them when they were coming across. In the third round robin, ladies and gentlemen, Sengoku Gaming were on red side, DFM was on blue side, and DFM had drafted a composition. They had played this game to a point where DFM were decisively winning it. And when we're saying decisively winning it, we're meaning they got the Korean bug reset, which everybody was talking about, and I'm going to pass to Nymaera for more context.
So the bug was, if you took Hex Flash, if you took Hex Flash, there was like I can't remember what the situation was, nor do I know if it was public, so I won't speculate on it as well. I actually get like the bug reports now, so I'm like, ooh, I know what caused XYZ stuff, even though I'm like, you just get copied into like the company-wide email stuff, and I'm like, huh, that's what it was. Sure. Anyway, Hex Flash, this is publicly known. Hex Flash basically made a couple of champions like instantly respawn. In LCK, on the same day that this happened in the LJL, it happened at the end of the game, and people were like, wow, isn't that funny? And they paused and was like, well, whatever, we won't do a remake, and the game was over. It also meant that after you respawn, if you were Poppy, you actually couldn't use your passive. So, like,
important.
You couldn't use your passive. It was like, this is a problem. Shield. You couldn't use your buckler thing. So then in the LJL between Sengoku and DFM, was usually in the advantage, and then this bug happened where Poppy dies on the enemy team and respawns. And the pause is like 2 hours long. It's decided to be a remake because there are very specific rules, basically where this is the other thing. It breaks Chrono Break. The game is like irrecoverable at that point. Like you couldn't remake it without the bug happening.
They couldn't even go 5 minutes later,
be offered,
apparently.
like a full remake, not just a Chrono Break. So you'd have to redraft, replay the game. This is after like 2 hours. And
by the way, if anyone's searching out for a VOD of this, we will have a VOD of something going up on our YouTube. It'll probably be the original match. We haven't done the replay match because reasons.
Yeah,
but just to make everybody aware of that.
Yes, but effectively, there are very specific criteria to just forfeit it and just say, look, this team is too far in the advantage. Even though DFM were winning that game, like that, there was like 10,000 gold ahead and they'd taken Baron. It was like, okay, they're winning that game, but there are very specific criteria for ending the game. I'm just saying, like, look, we can't remake
something around Nexus turrets, if I remember.
It's something
right.
like it's like 10,000 gold plus a certain amount of turrets or whatever. Yeah, it's like if there's a Nexus or turret down, then it's like whatever.
And to bring up, obviously, Riot Japan has different rule sets to Riot Korea, which have different rule sets to Riot.
They're fairly aligned on this one. I feel like.
That's good.
I feel like this one, but I do think they're all quite outdated, which is why it's like. I think
agree with you on that.
I'm going to imagine that this wasn't a likely foreseen scenario. I don't think they've thought about. I don't know whether they've thought about this for a while, but it probably needs to have a look.
The amount of bugs currently in League at the moment, in all fairness, with the TP bug at the moment as well going on.
The other thing is like you can't really change rules mid-split.
No, absolutely. It's a rock and a hard place.
Well, yeah, the bullet's flown the chamber at that point. You can't really do much about it. So it's like, well, can't really deal with that. But yeah, so that was the case, and DFM had to replay against Sengoku, and they got beat. So they played basically glorified best of 2, and Sengoku ended up.
Well, it went 1-1. But the more important one to win was the second one, which is
that's the only one that counts.
Yeah,
now, I do think actually, ironically, this is probably very good practice because going into the series, we know it's very, very close. But DFM now have a little bit more footage on how Sengoku would try to answer them about certain drafts and whatever. So they basically have an extra game versus their closest rivals. And I think that if there is any team that is going to benefit from more footage and more time to prepare, it is DFM. I think they have the best coaching staff in the league.
They've said that to us.
Yeah,
literally.
And I think they are the best coaching staff in the league. Yeah, it's tilting as hell, but I think losing the side choice, it sucks. But I think that DFM in this series, thinking back to even the series that they had in spring, the 5-game one was still closer than people. It was still more DFM sided than we think, right? Because one of the games they lost, they were hilariously in the advantage and they just kind of overdived a couple of times. The other one was like a genuine crazy Sengoku just smashed them. But that means that 4 out of the 5 games they were, winning, and then like 3 out of the games they ended up winning. And then in the upper bracket, obviously 3-0'd them. So I look at this and I think that Sengoku I'm gonna say it's in terms of winning the entire split, I'd give him like a 25-30% chance of winning over the course of like winning Juggernaut match and then into winning finals or whatever. However that route plays out, I think that DFM are still coming in heavy favorites here. What about you?
I've got to ask this question before I give my perspective because you just set me up for it. Do you think Sengoku could drop a game to anybody coming through the lower bracket? Could drop a game first. I'm just going to say one game.
Depends if their demons about early game turns up again. If they're kind of like really imprecise in early game. Oh god, but Hawks aren't good at that either. And Hawks aren't going to lose in the lower bracket. Okay, so if someone else lost in the upper and lower bracket, what would happen?
Crest Gaming Act, boys and girls, let's go.
Unironically, the highest chance they have of losing a game...
Yeah.
Oh no, but... the highest chance they have of losing a game is either they flub early game and they let the Hawks get into a crazy good scenario against them. I think the Hawks have like a chance of taking a game off them. I don't think I'd give them 2, but I'd give them 1. I think it could go 3-1 to...
All right, so we're in accordance there. All right, cool.
But then CGA, I mean, there is the absolute cursed run of like CGA coin flipping their way to a finals or something. But
you know what? If it was going to be any time... God bless Hybrid and like Kasin, because their careers are about to go from, well, we don't know where they're going to actually the moon if you can hit a finals like that, beating a Sengoku Gaming like this. A lot of eyes will come on you. I can guarantee you that for sure. So DFM versus Sengoku Gaming. I I do agree with you. I do think it is slightly DFM favored. They are a team who has purposely made it known to us that they love to see footage. They love being in the Juggernaut match so they can watch everybody in the losers bracket. They love winning the Juggernaut match so they can then watch the semi-finals. So, and they've also done, when they've fallen into that spot, they have done the mental mind games to fuck with people to get them into the finals. They are very, very good at this. They're an extremely one. I mean, thank you, Kazu, because he's actually a Giga Brain player, coach. We've talked to him. He's also a Giga Brain player, in all fairness, actually. Also beat down one Kia. Almost beat down one Kia. Should have beaten. I'm never going to get over that one. But outside of that, though, I think if there is going to be an interesting spot, I am excited to watch mid lane. Jet and Yaharong have honestly been just like jostling one another to be best in role. And honestly speaking, while we have definitively come down in one sense, when our all-pro rankings come out, which should be just before tomorrow's broadcast, ladies and gentlemen.
We'll talk about that maybe next episode. That's good enough content for them.
It is. It's partly for the broadcast and also partly for us to recap on here and to highlight, because I think it'll be a lot of fun. Other than that, though, sadly, I do think Paz is about to get absolutely smacked home by Ebby.
Yeah, that's not going to be pretty, actually. No. There were some points like earlier in the split where it's like, well, it's an okay matchup, whatever, but like,
Ebby's been solo killing everybody, like again, even like, Kinatsu at this point.
But this like comes down to the point where it's just like DFM can play towards bot side, play towards wherever, and Ebby's just going to like Ebby is the only player in the LJL that you cannot answer. Like no one answers Ebby. He is the unanswerable advantage in the LJL. Like it's like how Caps was for a little bit. Well, for a long time.
It's honestly what Boogie was like in 2020 for us.
Yeah, true. It's just like a player that is so far ahead of the rest of their role. You know that you are passively going to win through them, which gives you so many options.
In spring.
Yeah, you can just play. You can either play to this guy or play away from him, and you just have incredible rewards from this guy just winning.
Yeah, honestly, a gorgeous talent. I'm amazed he's still in the LJL. We'll have to see if he stays here for another season. I hope he does, but if he wants to go elsewhere and play in LEC or LCS for like a retirement season, Ebby, go get that bag. You deserve it, mate. Go get that bag, then return back to Japan and do a bunch of community tournaments again, because, mate, I salute you. Outside of that, I think bot lane will be very fun to watch, but I don't think there's an edge, honestly. Just consistently, honestly, giving more praise to Sengoku Gaming. I think NT especially has been a player who has gone very underappreciated by, I think, the wider community.
The greatest way for me to put this is most times when I thought about Ebby in the past, not Ebby, NC in the past, like I'd have some negative to say about him, but say he was consistent. I haven't had a bad thing to say about him in this split. Like, considering Vital has been so good, I'm actually starting to readjust and think, actually, how much of that is also NC being really good too? Like, NC has been probably the most consistent non-DFM player we've ever had. I think that's fair to say. I think he's been the most consistent non-DFM player.
Probably historically
maybe you could say Hachimetra, but NT's actually had better results than Hachimetra over time, I think.
I guess you could technically argue it's Paz as well, because he just keeps making Worlds and International.
Splits, though. But NT had a down split too, actually. They both had that at the same time. Okay, he's up there, though. He's in like...
absolutely. Remember, he was that player I kept championing going, he always makes playoffs.
Finished top 3. And then he always made top 3, right? It's fucking crazy.
But then, like, he's probably locked for top... Well, no, he is locked for top 3 now. So by making Juggernaut...
Once again, he's back on form. So I look at this guy and I think, like, he's multi-talented, he fills the role, and he's just been generically very good. And particularly since one of the strongest points of Sengoku is their laning phase in the 2v2, like, NT's a big part of that. So, yeah, I think... I think you're right. I think he has been underrated. I think that he's not been very visible because Vital has been so good for Sengoku. And of course, Honey before that as well. But NT has had a hell of a split.
Good credit to NT. I'm excited. Harp is obviously still absolutely insane, and Udapon is just Udapon. There's not much more to really say about the DFM bot lane. They are still insane. And I honestly do think, while I don't think they are necessarily favored, just because I think that, just to credit Sengoku Gaming, I think the bot lane is more 50-50. I don't think the edge is going to come through the bot lane plays, outside of maybe just minor mistakes being capitalized, because I think both sides of the coin could do that. I think it's going to come from the top side. Or, and this I know is a bit sacrilege to say, I don't know if Once can quite match up to Steel in a BO5. I'm using that caveat of BO5 in it for Steel.
It depends whether we get like semifinals Once against Rascal Jester last split, where he was so good. So here's some light homework for anyone that wants to read up on this stuff and gets prepared for it. Game 5 semifinals. Listen to our cast of it, because I think we talk it through really, really well. Because there's a lane swap. There's a lane swap which comes through, and Once just completely neuters it. Like, Once is just incredibly good at covering where the enemy jungler is going to be. And he, like, saves the dives and everything. So I think that if Once turns up on that kind of form, I think that DFM have sometimes been very aggressive and gotten away with the fact that other teams don't know how to play early game. I think if Once turns up like that, it gets interesting. I still back Steel. I think that even though Once is great and has a great split, Steel's had the best year of his career. I have been, in the past, a bit of a Steel hater. This guy has been orchestrating so much for DFM.
Well, and part of that comes into the fact that, I mean, when Once was doing this, it was against Hachimecha. Whereas Steel is terrifying, because you can watch the minimap sometimes in games, and you get like 7 or 8 minutes in, right? And this is sometimes where some other junglers in the league, they start dropping off and they're not pinging as much, and you can tell them they're not quite sure where the enemy is. Steel always knows. Like, it's I would actually be scared.
Really good.
They're really good at tracking. And within that, the laners are really good at using that information to benefit them, and it's just, DFM is a well-oiled machine. I'm not to say something we have said before and several times during this podcast season, to make everybody aware, especially during summer. This is not the DFM of 2021 summer.
No, it's not. It's
not. That was a very special roster where a lot of things came together at the perfect time. Gang offered and brought something that Harp still hasn't quite filled. Now, it's an unknown
bringing it a little bit now, actually. I'll say he's really getting there. Because if you look at actually the game that gets replayed, like the original game of DFM versus Sengoku, he plays Morgana, and he absolutely tears Sengoku a new one. He's like flash binding very early on and just killing people left, right, and center. I think Harp is arguably the best player in the LJL, actually. He's incredibly good. He's also shot calling for the team. I think a lot of why Steel looks very good is because actually Steel and Harp are good, and jungle support is the most part of any top-level team, and the most important part of any top-level team. I think that's why you see some teams fail, even though they have very talented individual players. If their jungle support is not doing well, then you struggle to showcase your talent outside of that. I think that because I think that Harp, because he started coming into his own as a playmaker and doing a bit more of that special magic, which Gang used to do as well as being an incredibly good laning support, I think DFM are, once again, much like 2021 DFM in a separate way, starting to improve into summer. And I think that should this team go to Worlds, I think that we will see an improvement of them from SI. Hopefully, but we say that all the time, so, you know.
I have a lot of worries about Yaharong internationally, but it's only Yaharong. It's only Yaharong because of what we saw last time. We know they definitely have tilt problems. Whereas I don't know. It's like, can I just? I don't want to do this, and this is incredibly disrespectful. So I don't naturally mean it. But in a world, I would love to just have Jet be sent as the mid laner, just because Jet I don't know, he just brings that extra level. I don't know. You're probably literally tossing up between two hairs. Like, they're both as good as one another. They bring different things to their team. So in all fairness, actually, I'm just going to shut up and just conclude that we're both going DFM, but it's going to be a tight series.
So what we've done in this segment, to wrap it up, is we've given a couple of moving points, like moving parts, to say, if this happens, this will affect the teams this way. But with all things said and done, we think DFM are favorites. So there is some mobility, particularly in the jungle, in how Once can play defensively. In terms of early game, that might affect this matchup. And then also, how bad can this top lane matchup go? If Ebby just starts running them through, then whatever, that's crazy, right?
It might just be a 3-0
we think that DFM are coming in with the advantage.
Yeah. 3-1, 3-1 DFM.
Could be a 3-0 actually if they get a good enough read.
I mean, if it is, it's a repeat from spring.
I think it should be 3-1. Look, DFM still have this issue where they occasionally overdive and just give over free games where they shouldn't. But on the whole, they've been very good at closing out games. So I think we'll see. I think we'll see a 3-1, and then finals is where things get funky if they get to do anything more after that point.
I mean, you just assume at that point, realistically, it's just going to be Sengoku probably repeat, and then you get the true BO5 because finals always turns everybody on, as they say. The reason, ladies and gentlemen, we ran through all of those is because actually, by the time you listen to this next podcast, we will have actually had all these matches already unfold. LJL is not having its slow playoff season as we have normally done. We are going to be rapidly going through this. So tomorrow we have got the match for the Fukuoka SoftBank Hawks Gaming facing off against Burning Core. On the 26th, so that's going to be Friday, over at 10 o'clock, by the way. All of this is British Standard Time, I think is what it's called. Will be Friday, and that's going to be 10 o'clock, Rascal Jester facing off against Cross Gaming Act. And then on Sunday, we will have Sengoku Gaming facing off against DFM. Nymaera, what
it's
an
very
episode.
Condensed schedule, that.
Yeah, it's a lot of games of LJL action all happening in a very short space of time. And we're going to be really knowing, by this time next week, we're already going to know one of the teams in finals.
Yeah.
We're going to know the two teams that are about to face off in the lower bracket match, which means we're also going to be having a...
And whether like any of those teams are actually good enough to knock over the top three.
Like, yeah.
We're expecting them not to like kill the hype around playoffs, but like top three are...
If you're listening to this podcast, you want to know.
Yeah, if you want to know about this shit, like obviously top two, they're very, very clear cut right now. Unless we see a huge improvement from one of the fourth to sixth place teams, or the Hawks just like go up another level, I ain't confident in any of those teams really bringing bigger guns to bear, shall we say.
And if you're interested about our world's opinions and our teams going to World, you're going to have to catch our next episode, because that's not what this one's for. Nymaera, I think this is the time that we should close ourselves out. So, what are you going to be doing over this next week or two?
I will be on the LEC for one of the playoff days, the very first one. I'll be casting that with Quick Shot and Cadril, which I've never cast with Cadril before, so that'll be a fun experience. Big old TriCast, so I'll be looking forward to that. Besides that, not like a huge amount. I'll be existing.
That's a good job. I'm proud of you.
That's kind of it, really.
Yeah, no, that can be it. For me, I'm hopeful I'll have some good news. I've been saying good news for like months now on the podcast.
That'll be great.
So hopefully good news is coming, ladies and gentlemen. Outside of that, hopefully I got my dissertation done, which isn't actually a dissertation, a formal one, but hopefully I've got that done. I don't want it to go over. Did you know that on average you can say about 300 words in a minute? So I've got about 2 hours currently of talking about Magic the Gathering currently on my paper. So that's going to be fun. I'm making a short film, but it's not a short film anymore. But with that said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and or watching. If you caught this podcast, you can always catch it wherever you get your podcast needs. Spotify, Apple, the internet, YouTube. Rate us, review us, tell us what we're doing good, tell us what we're doing bad. We appreciate it. Nymaera, have you got anything else you want to say?
Get on my level. I don't know. I didn't really have anything to say. I just
get
want
on
to say
his
funny
level. Yeah.
That one.
That said, we'll be back soon, people. I can't believe DFM are going to win all of this, Nymaera. I can't be leaking the script.
Oh my god. Crazy.